Congressman Adam Kinzinger is a Republican representing Illinois' 16th District, covering Rockford to Ottawa, all the way to Watseka, joining us today by Skype. Congressman, happy Easter to you.
Happy Easter, thanks.
And thank you. And let me start by saying, look, it's no surprise to anybody that Governor Pritzker and President Trump butt heads over how this pandemic is being handled. You said both have made mistakes. Let's take a positive spin. What's going right now?
I think a couple things are going right. First off, the American people's reaction. You know, one of the concerns when you looked at some of the early projections of how many would die or be infected was that only like 50% of Americans would follow through, and it's somewhere in like the 90-95 range. That's huge. That actually shortens the amount of time we're going to have to be in this situation. I think there have been some good responses from the federal government in terms of trying to get as much PPE done as we could and rolling out testing as quickly as we could. The state government as well from a communication perspective, which is really important. And I think what else has been pretty incredible is what the private sector's done. I mean, 6 months ago, we never knew what coronavirus or COVID-19 even was. And now you have, for instance, Abbott Labs that is now basically saving the testing thing by being able to get results quickly and get that done. So I think there's a lot right. There's some things wrong, but I think a lot of that is, you know, who in the world expected something like this besides in theory? And now we're better prepared if something happens again.
You guys barely passed the third stimulus package, and already there's discussion of the fourth. Some people saying we really ought to wait and see how the third one does before we take on a fourth. What's your feeling about that? And if there is a fourth, in your view, who should it help? Businesses, individuals? What should happen?
I think we need to be cautious on kind of jumping to a fourth. What we don't want to do is just take an emergency and react and panic. I mean, the debt that we're driving up, it's necessary at this point, but it's also really intense. It's a lot of debt. There's going to be a lot we're going to have to pay off someday. So I think the payroll protection program, for instance, putting more funds into that is important, seeing where that settles out. And then without trying to get either the right or the left's political agenda done, it's taking a look at where the shortfalls are, whether it's rural health, whether it's community health centers, and fixing it that way. I also think that longer term, whether this is in the fourth or later, we really need an infrastructure package in this country. Gas prices are low, so we can talk about how to pay for it that way. But also infrastructure is deteriorated, and it's a great opportunity to get people back to work quickly, but do it the right way.
So it looks like the money printers are going 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. At some point, do we hit a standard where we're spending so much money, and I understand the importance of spending it, but the hole's so deep we can't get out of it?
Yeah, and we're close. And that's where, here's the point. We've got to have grown-up discussions in our country and in our state. In the state, we know that the pension system is unsustainable. In our country, we know that the entitlement system is unsustainable. Everybody has different views of how to fix that. Some want to tax more, some want to cut. There is a way to make it sustainable when 70% of federal expenditures are things that in Congress we don't even control. We don't appropriate. That's where it's going to take hard decisions. And really the test of leadership is going to come when this economy recovers. Do we take this debt seriously, or do we keep just printing money? Because while it may not be today, very soon we're going to see massive inflation in this country if we're not careful and we just print money and we don't deal with the underlying cause of problem.
Look, our viewers are watching this right now, and many live in your district, and they're going, you know what, that's all fine and good, but I don't have my $1,200 check yet, and I've lost my job, and I'm not paying my rent, and maybe you're trying to help me there, but that's going to come home to roost one day. What do you say to people who are essentially losing everything right now, and they still don't have a check?
No, I'm as frustrated as they are. You know, when you all of a sudden have to send a check to millions and millions of Americans that the IRS wasn't expecting, it does take some time. We expect that very shortly, we don't have an exact date, but in the near future, people with direct deposit information with the IRS will get that check, and then the checks will be mailed out after that. It's always a good reason, I guess, to have direct deposit with the IRS. And then in terms of some of the kinks in the small business loans, again, you're rolling out a gigantic program in like 2 weeks, where usually it takes the federal government a year. So we're going to continue to do our best to try to fix that problem, but I understand the frustrations for sure.
How important to you is having independent watchdogs watch over the doling out of money, the half a billion that, you know, Mnuchin is looking over? The president's been removing some of those watchdogs, putting his own people in. You concerned, or are you cool with it?
No, I certainly think we need watchdogs, and not necessarily the president's people, but not people necessarily against him. We just need folks that are going to look at it and say, is the money being spent where it was supposed to be spent? What are the states doing with it? You know, we talk about this boost to unemployment. I've already hearing from a lot of folks that are concerned that they're trying to ask people to come back to work, and folks are like, well, I make more on unemployment with this boost. And at that point, you don't blame somebody for not coming back to work, but they should. So how are we going to have oversight that the money is spent directly? We need solid oversight. And the problem is when you have to spend quickly in an emergency situation like this, really time's of the essence.
Yeah, I think I said $500 billion. I should have said $500 billion. That's what that is. Look, 17 million people almost at this point, 10% of the workforce basically out of work. What are you hearing from constituents, from businesses in your community? The president says, hey, we're going to flip a light switch and get it all moving real quick. What do you think?
Well, I hope so. I think, when I've seen economic analysis, they say, if this thing ends in the next month or month and a half, or at least we start to reopen, they expect that third and fourth quarter rebound's going to be significant. It will not get to where we were right before the pandemic in that short of amount of time, but we'll do some rebounding. So, the economy was strong when we went in, so the fundamentals are there. The question is, the longer this stays closed, you have things like underlying housing market decay, which, as we know, in 2008 was a massive problem with the financial crisis. So as long as we can turn this around quickly, soon, I think long-term we'll look back and we'll have recovered well. But the longer this goes, the worse it is. And people are miserable right now, and they're scared.
Hey, finally, let me tap into your world of expertise. You serve in the Air National Guard. Some Guard has been called up, working McCormick Place and whatever. Should we be using National Guard more? Are you receiving any orders to do something?
I haven't been called yet. There's actually a pretty decent chance we may be in the next week or two. I think the Guard, needs to do more, and it's not, patrolling streets in this case. People are not out rioting. They're not breaking into stores, and police can continue to maintain order. But it's backing up areas where they need help. For instance, moving medical supplies, which is what we would probably do in my aircraft if we got called up. It's augmenting, where folks have COVID and maybe they're a prison guard and they can't guard the prison. You can send the Guard in to help that way. And I do believe they should be more federalized because that actually helps with the cost. The federal government will carry 75% of the cost if they come under what's called federal Title 32 or federalized state duty.
All right, Congressman Adam Kinzinger, thank you for your service, sir. Have a good Easter. Appreciate you joining me.
You bet. Take care.